Jacob, I'm going to leave you to wander hell alone for a moment while we read through some Walter Benjamin on stream.
Hell yeah. Alright. I'll do what I can.
Just for clarification, I am reading the work of art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. This is in my Norton's Anthology of Criticism, a very, very handy volume or tome to have or carry. It's kind of hard to really see on camera and such. But it's an anthology of just various essays on literary theory and criticism throughout history. It starts with like Plato, the Greeks, all that. It moves on to St. Augustine, Derrida. There's some Foucault, Walter Benjamin. It goes all the way up to some Zizek and some Frederick Jameson. Just a very, very good compilation to prime yourself on just different the history of criticism and art in general. It also is a good way to get into, you read an essay here from a dude you like, you can search up the rest of their work until the internet just totally stops working. But yeah, a Norton's Anthology of Criticism. But this is Walter Benjamin, the work of art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. It's cool, Philly man. Maybe down the line we'll do something. It seems like as we navigate through hell, the answer is to find more friends. So in some sort of collective action, we might organize a big Doom battle game for people to play.
Pretty.
Stay tuned to TECHNOPOVERTY, and you may be able to join us for Doom WAD or 2. Alright.
Help us navigate hell.
So we're opening with a quote. The work of art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Our fine arts were developed, their types and uses were established, in times very different from the present, by men whose power of action upon things was insignificant in comparison with ours. But the amazing growth of our techniques, the adaptability and precision they have attained, the ideas and habits they are creating, make it a certainty that profound changes are impending in the ancient craft of the beautiful. In all the arts, there is a physical component which can no longer be considered or treated as it used to be, which cannot remain unaffected by our modern knowledge and power. For the last 20 years, neither matter nor space nor time has been what it was from time immemorial. We must expect great innovations to transform the entire technique of the arts, thereby affecting artistic invention itself, and perhaps even bringing about an amazing change in our very notion of art. That's Paul Verrier. Preface. When Marx undertook his critique of the capitalistic mode of production, this mode was in its infancy. Marx directed his efforts in such a way as to give them prognostic value. He went back to the basic conditions underlying capitalistic production and through his presentation showed what could be expected of capitalism in the future. The result was that one could expect it not only to exploit the proletariat with increasing intensity, but ultimately to create conditions which would make it possible to abolish capitalism itself. The transformation of the superstructure, which takes place far more slowly than that of the substructure, has taken more than half a century to manifest in all areas of culture. The change in the conditions of the production. Only today can it be indicated what form this has taken. Certain prognostic requirements should be met by these statements. However, theses about the art of the proletariat after its assumption of power, or about the art of a classless society, would have less bearing on these demands than theses about the developmental tendencies of art under present conditions of production. Their dialectic is no less noticeable in the superstructure than in the economy. It would therefore be wrong to underestimate the value of such theses as a weapon. They brush aside a number of outmoded concepts, such as creativity and genius, eternal value and mystery, concepts whose uncontrolled, and at present almost uncontrollable application, would lead to a processing of data in the fascist sense. The concepts which are introduced into the theory of art in what follows differ from the more familiar terms in that they are completely useless for the purposes of fascism. They are, on the other hand, useful for the formulation of revolutionary demands in the politics of art. 1. In principle, a work of art has always been reproducible. Man-made artifacts could always be imitated by men. Replicas were made by pupils in practice of their craft, by masters for diffusing their works, and finally, by third parties in pursuit of gain. Mechanical reproduction of a work of art, however, represents something new. Historically, it advanced intermittently, and in leaps at long intervals, but with accelerated intensity. The Greeks knew only two procedures of technically reproducing works of art: founding and stamping. Bronzes, terracottas, and coins were the only artworks which they could produce in quantity. All others were unique and could not be mechanically reproduced. With the woodcut, graphic art became mechanically reproducible for the first time, long before script became reproducible by print. The enormous changes which printing, the mechanical reproduction of writing, has brought about in literature are a familiar story. However, within the phenomenon which we are here examining from the perspective of world history, print is merely a special, though particularly important, case. During the Middle Ages, engraving and etching were added to the woodcut. At the beginning of the 19th century, lithography made its appearance. With lithography, the technique of reproduction reached an essentially new stage. This much more direct process was distinguished by the tracing of the design of stone rather than its incision on a block of wood or its etching on a copper plate, and permitted graphic art for the first time to put its products on the market, not only in large numbers as hereto, but also in daily changing forms. Lithography enabled graphic art to illustrate everyday life, and it began to keep pace with printing. But only a few decades after its invention, lithography was surpassed by photography. For the first time in the process of pictorial reproduction, photography freed the hand of the most important artistic functions, which henceforth devolved only upon the eye looking into a lens. Since the eye perceives more swiftly than the hand can draw, the process of pictorial reproduction was accelerated so enormously that it could keep pace with speech. A film operator shooting a scene in the studio captures the images at the speed of the actor's speech. Just as lithography virtually implied the illustrated newspaper, so did photography foreshadow the sound film. The technical reproduction of sound was tackled at the end of the last century. These convergent endeavors made predictable a situation which Paul Viret pointed out with his sentence: just as water, gas, and electricity are brought into the houses from far off to satisfy our needs in response to a minimal effort, so we shall be supplied with visual or auditory images, which will appear and disappear at a simple movement of the hand, hardly more than a sign. Around 1900, technical reproduction had reached a standard that not only permitted it to reproduce all transmitted works of art, and thus to cause the most profound change in their impact upon the public, it also had captured a place of its own among the artistic processes. For the study of this standard, nothing is more revealing than the nature of the repercussions that these two different manifestations, the reproduction of works of art and the art of film, have had on art in its traditional form. 2. Even the most perfect reproduction of a work of art is lacking in one element: its presence in time and space, its unique existence at the place where it happens to be. This unique existence of the work of art determined the history to which it was subject throughout the time of its existence. This includes the changes which it may have suffered in physical condition over the years, as well as the various changes in its ownership. The traces of the first can be revealed only by chemical or physical analysis, which is impossible to perform on the reproduction. Changes of ownership are subject to a tradition which must be traced from the situation of the original. The presence of the original is the prerequisite to the concept of authenticity. Chemical analysis of the patina of a bronze can help to establish this, as does the proof that a given manuscript of the Middle Ages stems from an archive of the 15th century. The whole sphere of authenticity is outside technical, and of course, not only technical, reproducibility. Confronted with its manual reproduction, which was usually branded as a forgery, the original preserved all its authority. Not so vis-a-vis technical reproduction. The reason is twofold. First, process reproduction is more independent of the original than manual reproduction. For example, in photography, process reproduction can bring out those aspects of the original that are unattainable to the naked eye, yet accessible to the lens, which is adjustable and chooses its angle at will. And photographic reproduction, with the aid of certain processes, such as enlargement or slow motion, can capture images which escape natural vision. Secondly, technical reproduction can put a copy of the original into situations which would be out of reach for the original itself. Above all, it enables the original to meet the beholder halfway, be it in the form of a photograph or a phonograph record. The cathedral leaves its locale to be received in the studio of a lover of art. The choral production, performed in an auditorium or in the open air, resounds the drawing room. The situations into which the product of mechanical reproduction can be brought may not touch the actual work of art, yet the quality of its presence is always depreciated. This holds not only for the artwork, but also, for instance, for a landscape, which passes in review before the spectator in a movie. In the case of the art object, a most sensitive nucleus, namely its authenticity, is interfered with, whereas no natural object is vulnerable on its score. The authenticity of a thing is the essence of all that is transmissible from its beginning, ranging from its substantive duration to its testimony to the history which it has experienced. Since the historical testimony rests on the authenticity, the former, too, is jeopardized by reproduction when substantive duration ceases to matter. And what is really jeopardized is when the historical testimony is affected is the authority of the object. Philly Man recommending Japanese community projects. You know what, Philly Man? I think we're going to find a guide you may find familiar who's going to perhaps help us through a few things in the coming weeks. Just a heads up about future episodes, though. Tomorrow, Shin Megami Tuesdays is back. We are still playing Nocturne. On Thursday, July 3rd, we are not having a stream. Instead, on Friday, July 4th, we're streaming at 2 p.m. Central Time. We have a special holiday-themed game for the 4th of July. It is not going to be a Doom due to the transfixion of time, space, date, all that good stuff. America's birthday overrides our hellish domain for a day. We're going to be playing a special game. I'm going to keep it secret up until we play it. I may have slipped and mentioned it in the past before, but if not, I'm going to keep my lips sealed. And in true American fashion, there is no book associated with the July 4th game. So, heads up on that. Yeah, and so we're talking about the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, and Benjamin here is talking about how mechanical reproduction robs the authenticity of an object, how the original of an object is granted authenticity by the time it is made in and the time it endures. And you know what, Jacob? I had a very hellish thought when I was at the grocery store the other day. There was some mask for mask. I'm going to tell you right now, it is not that, but down the line, I'll consider it. This is going to be, I'll give a few hints. It's a PS2 game. It is still within the same genre as Doom, except we're going to see how a game made with on a technically more powerful console with more powerful tools at its disposal comes out worse than Doom. Yeah. I'm not going to say more about the July 4th game, but maybe next year or the year thereafter, if we turn July 4th into a regular thing, Metal Wolf Chaos is a good call. But Mask for Mask, yeah, we have something interesting coming up on the 4th of July. Once again, 2 p.m. CST that day. Back to my hellish thought, I think it was Tears for Fears. There was like an 80s top 40 pop kind of inoffensive song at the grocery store. It was one I recognized because I recognized the vocalist, but I didn't necessarily know the name of the song. I was just like, oh yeah, I've heard this person sing other top 40 80s hits before. It's that one band. Yeah. But I was thinking, at what point could a grocery store or just these licensed public music spaces start slipping in AI-generated tracks that sound like old bands just enough, but it's new or original stuff so that it costs less and it's cheaper to make and produce, and people just forget. Like, the context of the original pop music is gone. There's already enough boomer dads out there who will tell you nobody listens to the lyrics. We still consistently listen to Bruce Springsteen at right-wing rallies. I'm being told Spotify's already doing that. I did see something, some Beach Boys styled, like it looks like a 60s kind of hipsterdom style aesthetic, just a lo-fi. What was the name of that band? It had like 300,000 listens already, but yeah, so, Benjamin writing this, let me look up again the year this was, but I want to say the 1920s, but let's make sure.
Fuck you, demon.
1935 is when Benjamin was writing this. So in 1935, he's talking about the loss of authenticity in art as we reproduce it mechanically in a way that robs it of craft and context. You know, mass reproduction. It's funny because I'm using Magic the Gathering cards as bookmarks in this Norton's anthology. I have multiple Magic the Gathering cards, duplicates. This is the world map card. For any who don't know, Magic the Gathering right now is doing a Final Fantasy crossover, and the 90s kid in me just could not resist picking up a few boosters. But I get this world map card, quite a few of them. I've been using them as bookmarks in this big, thick tome. But yes, Mask for Mask, AI slop is the art of the fascist movement in the way that it is, you know, seeking to remove friction and only recreate the ideal. It can't really imagine anything new. It's just a way to shorthand and automate these kind of essentialist ideas of what art is. You can tell, like, even if you wanted to give AI the benefit of the doubt, minus the theft aspect, the environmental aspect, no one's just made cool art with it. Like, cool art would be self-evident. It would be something where people are like, oh shit, that fucks. But like, every time there's like, look at this award-winning AI thing we put this contest, people are like, get the fuck out of here, we don't want this. This is something I saw a post online earlier talking about how, you know, when Google tools were first being unleashed on the internet, people wanted to use them. They didn't need to really advertise them. They were serving a need. Kind of in the same way when we were talking about Naked Lunch during Umarangi generation, the difference between a commune and a bureau. You know, the commune serving a need, that was first. The bureau's making problems for it to police. Yeah, Philly man, they will need to continue to farm human-made art to keep the machine from generating slop made from its own slop. Coherent art wizards or influencers or those just speaking sensibly to the robot so that it doesn't go insane and just vomit on itself.
I was just thinking too, like, how much like Matt Walsh must love being able to use AI for his terrible
yeah,
movies.
We see
like,
this.
It's the exact sort of thing of like, we can't get an actual situation to work, so I will fabricate one with a computer that can't tell me no.
Right,
And like, it won't tell me why it's a bad idea.
Right, King of Mystery, people will just accept the double triple slop. That is a personal hell idea of mine. I'm thinking of a grocery store I'm wandering around, and all the music is just discount tracks that are familiar enough. You're like, hey, this is a Judas Priest song. Wait, no, it's like, I've never heard this one. Wait, fuck. This isn't Tears for Fears. This isn't The Police. What? Like, just 80s AOR and new wave and pop hits from a generation slightly older than me. So I recognize. So that the extra layer of hell is that, like, I don't even get to indulge in nostalgia. I recognize it as a very self-conscious, like, older person doing the overindulgent nostalgia thing. It's a hell of knowing the thing is fake and seeing people eat it anyways. Right, exactly. Yeah, ChatGPT, rewrite Judas Priest but straight. Pictures of Rob Halford on stage, just not leather daddied up. It'd be the saddest thing.
It just like wouldn't work. Like, why doesn't this fuck?
All right, back
How
to
come people don't think my straight stuff is cool.
Back to the Benjamin. Yeah, Philly man, I say that and then I just look right back at chat to engage with y'all, but you know what? That's the point of it being a stream. These aren't curated essays. This is playing the games and bouncing context off of them. Yeah, Philly man, Doom mods, I've seen like AI try to do procedurally generated Doom stuff and it just falls apart because like it doesn't actually understand what a door is, doesn't actually understand what the floor is. I'm going to find some sort of Charon to help guide us through this hell and maybe explain the physics of the Doom reality on a real meta ethical level. We're going to get into just the ontology of the Doom engine. That's going to be perhaps after July 4th. I don't want to show our hand too much. I don't want to get the attention of the bigwigs, you know?
Yeah, it's been nice, honestly, not having them around. I hate to bring them up, but like,
Yeah,
it
we're
really
in
is nice
hell,
just like
but
doing
we're
our own
also
pace.
like free of our bosses and
Yeah,
obligations. This seems to like
we're in
really.
real hell, not corporate hell.
Yeah, we're off their like parallel dimension radar, which they're sniffing a little hard because I was bringing Lux in. I'm a little worried. We're gonna find a Pharaon. We're gonna have some friends. It'll be fine. Things will be fine. Yeah, you bring up Matt Walsh liking AI art, and it is kind of just very alarming and should be taken note of how so much of the reporting on the ethnic cleansing ICE is doing in LA, the opposing side to it is fueled almost completely by lies. Just that there's an invasion going on, all these people at their own jobs and such, just trying to get by, getting roughed up by dudes with guns, just roaming the streets, snatching you off the corner if you are the wrong color.
Such bullshit.
One might assume the eliminated element in the term aura and go on to say that which withers in the age of mechanical reproduction is the aura of the work of art. That's right, we're aura farming tonight. I'm going to read that again. And this is key. This is something that we talk about when we talk about like the soul or the mise en scene or the coming together of things, like the moment in time and the way the art having dialogue is generating a thing beyond itself. One might assume the eliminated element in the term aura and go on to say that which withers in the age of mechanical reproduction is the aura of the work of art. This is a symptomatic process whose significant points beyond the realm of art. One might generalize by saying, the technique of reproduction detaches the reproduced object from the domain of tradition. One might generalize by saying, the technique of reproduction detaches the reproduced object from the domain of tradition. This is something I actually hold very dear. When he says the domain of tradition, I think of the domain of religion. I think of the concept of the sacred and what people really believe versus what they espouse they believe. Is like, what do they hold sacred or religious? Like, what actually animates them to act through life? I think of, I'll complain about Joe Brandon talking about fighting for the soul of America, but I also think about how Jan Sixers, their ultimate kind of animated action was a glorified complaint to the manager. There wasn't like an actual revolutionary structure to be supplanting what they were overthrowing. It was just a ventilation of anger. The way that's the practice removed from tradition. That's the core of the American culture that they're brought up on. Complaints to the manager. It's all consumer society stuff. It's not rooted in a religious.
I'm supposed to get this.
Yeah. It's not rooted in like a religious or spiritual fulfillment. It's literally like things are supposed to work as a store works. I need to talk to the manager. We are within a capitalist system. This is a market I am in, and the market's not working for me.
But I have money. Give me the thing.
You can buy crosses at the market, but that doesn't make the market a church. The technique of reproduction detaches the reproduced object from the domain of tradition. Like, this brings to mind 28 Years Later again, because that movie is so much about a kid's formative religious journey and this whole sincere tradition trip he goes on, and the end just questions if there's any actual value to what he did, because someone else in the exact same environment grew up a completely different way that seems to hold life less sacred.
Yeah, but they seem to be doing just fine.
That ending really raises questions to me, because I think of like model minorities and the way that America perpetuates a crab bucket mentality where the lower classes are made to fight each other because one class isn't performing like the other class. Like, that culture isn't right. Again, thinking of hip hop fear in the 90s and how that culture was just not the right culture, and you need to act more in a particular model than another. That's always been a very American phenomenon in my brain. So to realize like, oh, British people probably have something like that too. It just tickled me in a very fun way with the way 28 Years Later ended on that note.
Yeah, and literally someone pointing out just like a child being saved by a man who looks exactly like Jimmy Savile, the horrendous English pedophile.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Rogers term pedophile is just a really cool thing that they did as far as storytelling goes.
Yeah, I don't think we're spoiling much by talking about the ending in this way either, because so much of what that movie's gambling on is it makes you feel this kid's religion. It makes the adventure very haptic and sincere and earnest. It's about getting emotionally attenuated to the same range the kid's operating on, and then at the end of the movie, it's intentionally like stabbed. Your heart is intentionally cut open, and it's just like everything you've been holding sacred and dear for the past 2 hours as you watch Spike go on this journey is just like, question it. Movies are lies. It's the good kind of metatextual interrogation. It's the good kind of cliffhanger.
It's exactly the stuff you want, and I can't wait for the next one.
One might generalize by saying, the technique of reproduction detaches the reproduced object from the domain of tradition. By making many reproductions, it substitutes plurality of copies for a unique existence. And in permitting the reproduction to meet the beholder or listener in its own particular situation, it reactivates the object reproduced. These two processes lead to a tremendous shattering of tradition, which is the obverse of the contemporary crisis and renewal of mankind. Both processes are intimately connected with the contemporary mass movements. Their most powerful agent is the film. Its social significance, particularly in its most positive form, is inconceivable without its destructive, cathartic aspect, that is, the liquidation of the traditional value of the cultural heritage. This phenomenon is most palpable in the great historical films. It extends to ever new positions. In 1927, Abel Gance exclaimed enthusiastically, "Shakespeare, Rembrandt, Beethoven will make films. All legends, all mythologies, and all myths, all founders of religion, and the very religions, await their exposed resurrection. And the heroes crowd each other at the gate." Presumably, without intending it, he issued an invitation to a far-reaching liquidation. I want to read that again. A far-reaching liquidation. Talking about the way reproduction cheapens tradition, removes the religious from the sacred. Think about it. Shakespeare, Rembrandt, Beethoven, they will all make films, all legends, all mythologies, and all myths, all founders of religions, and the very religions themselves await their exposed resurrection, and the heroes crowd each other at the gate. Jacob, we have a Bruce Springsteen movie coming out that just looks like Walk Hard. It just looks like Walk Hard played straight. And like, you know, we've had Bohemian Rhapsody, which from I understand is kind of a train wreck. We've had that. We've had a few better Bowie pictures that aren't really like the Walk Hard biopic type thing. But so many of these like music bios and these history bios are just flooding the zone. All mysteries, all religions. We have Martin Scorsese doing a mini-series on the Saints, produced by Fox News. Everything's being resurrected as a movie, as a trend, dude, as something you can fandom dork out.
Everyone's going to make their new Garden State.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's having their chance to make their musical Garden State, and it's their like Walk Hard of it. And I'm just like, God damn, dude. Like, we get it. A musician had like a struggle, but like,
even J.D.
Don't get me wrong, I love Bob Dylan. I love all the art.
Yeah, I love that too.
Come on, dude.
It's more the insistence on turning it to hagiography, of elevating it into like mythology, and like these are gods. Like, I mean,
yeah.
Yes, the 60s was a decade of interesting cultural revolution for sure, but it was literally 60 years ago.
Right. Like, are we gonna do this for like who are horrendous pedophile directors that we can like make a biopic about and make him seem like a god and just kind of glaze over?
We've cited a few more recent works, but like a lot of this does trace back to Forrest Gump, you know, in terms of just trying to write it all into an mythology, and that the culture war of the American mid-century meant something, even though as Watergate and Vietnam and sort of Desert Storm and 9/11 show, we kind of, the superstructure moves on. We every button we press funds war.
It just can't help but do it.
There has to be a new imaginary approach to how we deconstruct this thing, because you can't just watch the movies and read the books. We've talked about this before on stream, but I'm going to get back to Walter Benjamin for right now. Part 3. During long periods of history, the mode of human sense perception changes with humanity's entire mode of existence. The manner in which human sense perception is organized, the medium in which it is accomplished, is determined not only by nature, but by historical circumstances as well. The 5th century, with its great shifts of population, saw the birth of the late Roman art industry and the Vienna Genesis, and there developed not only an art different from that of antiquity, but also a new kind of perception. The scholars of the Viennese school, Beagle and Wyckoff, who resisted the weight of classical tradition under which these later art forms had been buried, were the first to draw conclusions from them concerning the organization of perception at the time. However far-reaching their insight, these scholars limited themselves to showing the significant formal hallmark which characterized perception in the late Roman times. They did not attempt, and perhaps saw no way, to show the social transformations expressed by these changes of perception. The conditions for an analogous insight are far more favorable in the present, and if changes in the medium of contemporary perception can be comprehended as decay of the aura, it is possible to show its social causes. The concept of aura, which was proposed above with reference to historical objects, may be usefully be illustrated with reference to the aura of natural ones. We define the aura of the latter as the unique phenomenon of a distance, however close it may be. If, while resting on a summer afternoon, you follow with your eyes a mountain range on the horizon, or a branch which casts its shadow over you, you experience the aura of those mountains, of that branch. This image makes it easy to comprehend the social basis of the contemporary decay of the aura. It rests on 2 circumstances, both of which are related to the increasing significance of the masses in contemporary life. Namely, the desire of the contemporary masses to bring things closer, spatially and humanly, which is just as ardent as their bent toward overcoming the uniqueness of every reality by accepting its reproduction. Every day the urge grows stronger to get a hold of an object at very close range by way of its likeness, its reproduction. You too can own the monkeys if you buy the series on DVD. Take it home with you, live with it forever.
But buying isn't purchasing.
Oh no, yeah, that's an interesting headfuck. I'd be curious to see Benjamin's take on Were He Alive Today. Is like when purchasing is just a licensing agreement and you don't even actually own a copy of the thing. You're just licensed to use it. How does that change your feelings on things, Walter?
Yeah, where does that fit in God's picture for me?
Uniqueness and permanence are as closely linked to the latter as are the transitoriness and reproducibility of the formal. To pry an object from its shell, to destroy its aura, is the mark of a perception whose sense of the universal equality of things is increased to such a degree that it extracts it from even a unique object by means of reproduction. Thus is manifested in the field of perception what in the theoretical sphere is noticeable to the increasing importance of statistics. The adjustment of reality to the masses, and of the masses to reality, is a process of unlimited scope, as much for thinking as for perception. The adjustment of reality to the masses, and of the masses to reality, is a process of unlimited scope, as much for thinking as for perception. What is real, man?
Fuck, man.
But if we can all own copies of a movie and we're all just acknowledging they're copies of the movie, what remains to talk about within the movie? I guess aura could be perceived or persevered if your movie's actually saying something, if your art's actually seeking to communicate dialogue in earnest with someone. There's ways beyond just the craft of the thing to farm aura. The uniqueness of a work of art is inseparable from its being embedded in the fabric of tradition. This tradition itself is thoroughly alive and extremely changeable. An ancient statue of Venus, for example, stood in different traditional context with the Greeks, who made an object of veneration, than with the clerics of the Middle Ages, who viewed it as an ominous idol. Both of them, however, were equally confronted with its uniqueness, that is, its aura. Originally, the contextual integration of art in tradition found its expression in the cults. We know that the earliest artworks originated in the service of a ritual, first the magical, then the religious kind. It is significant that the existence of the work of art with reference to its aura is never entirely separated from its ritual function. In other words, the unique value of the authentic work of art has its basis in ritual, the location of its original use value. This ritualistic basis, however remote, is still recognizable as secularized ritual, even in the most profane forms of the cult of beauty. The secular cult of beauty, developed during the Renaissance and prevailing for 3 centuries, clearly showed that ritualistic basis in its decline and the first deep crisis which befell it. With the advent of the first truly revolutionary means of reproduction, photography, simultaneous with the rise of socialism, art sensed the approaching crisis which has become evident a century later. At the time, art reacted with the doctrine of art for art, that is, with the theology of art. This gave rise to what might be called a negative theology in the form of the idea of pure art, which not only denied any social function of art, but also any categorizing by subject matter. In poetry, Mallarmé was the first to take this position. Art for art. Art doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to serve a social purpose. Art is there to be art. It's there to provoke and to be beautiful and to distract or hit you with the sublime. An analysis of art in the age of mechanical reproduction must do justice to these relationships, for they lead us to an all-important insight. For the first time in world history, mechanical reproduction emancipates the work of art from its parasitical dependence on ritual. To an ever greater degree, the work of art reproduced becomes the work of art designed for reproducibility. From a photographic negative, for example, one can make any number of prints. To ask for the authentic print makes no sense. But the instant the criterion of authenticity ceases to be applicable to the artistic production, the total function of art is reversed. Instead of being based on ritual, it begins to be based on another practice: politics. Oh? I'm so keyed in on Doom maps being a certain length because of the Doom 1 and 2 campaigns that like I'll hit a teleporter room in here and think it's the end just because of like the usual pace and cadence of a Doom level I'm used to, and that's rarely the case. Like I have no reason to actually believe that, considering it's not labeled exit. Like the levels have consistently been labeled exits, and here I am still thinking like, oh, this is probably the exit. Like, no, Henry, it will be labeled exit. There's a absistent concept of a Doom map haunting me, and this game is constantly telling me it's not real and to stop thinking like that, and yet it persists in like a superstitious way. It's a phantom limb. It's a ghost in my brain.
Yes.
But yeah, have you felt that with these? Like you see a teleporter and you're like, oh, the end.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No, I just got spat at a fucking Hell Knight and a Cacodemon, and we're just no end in sight. Maybe hell is me constantly expecting the end to be just around the corner, and so I don't have any involvement in the game, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's the millennial.
That is the millennial
hell.
dilemma. That is maybe our shared conception of hell right there. It is
Yeah,
something that
absolutely.
was very sticking with me when we watched Stalker on the Discord, is how much the Stalker's both, yes, about being pliable and receptive and always like a child, but like how the reason you're like that is because it primes you, oh shit, this looks serious. Oh, and there's spiders down there? Fuck. I'm trying to talk about Stalker here, hell. But not just to be like pliable and receptive, but the reason you do that is because it lets you focus on your immediate surroundings and in the moment where to navigate. Because the zone's so weird and tricky and ever-changing, you need to find the next immediate step you can take. And so the Stalker's sense of pliability and flexibility enables him to take the next step. I think that's sort of the thing that is useful for describing a cultural paralysis or dread or NUI right now, is a lot of people don't know where to take the next step or how to take the next step.
Yeah, or what the next step would even mean.
In a very literal sense, because, I don't know, they're living in techno-poverty mindset. We're stuck confusing the religious with the political, and thinking the consumption of pop art, it has some totemic religious power. If we watch enough of the good movies, it asserts that there's a good and just firmware to the universe that will assert itself. No, I think we still have to actually do something on the hardware.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Stalker carries that sense of immediate pliability as he guides the professor and the writer through the zone. They're both... The writer's so caught up on what he's supposed to do long-term with his art, and the professor's caught up on both, like, well, I want to blow up the zone, so I gotta lie to these guys, and also No, you can reduce things to noble facts and the past and all of that nonsense. But the Stalker's, like... Benjamin has another thing called the Angel of History, and I think the Stalker exemplifies that quite well. The Angel of History doesn't get trapped in, like being stuck on looking at the past or looking at the forward. Like, they know how to navigate the present moment, and because they can navigate the present moment, if they have the right material privilege or access, they actually can shift history. But it's the same way, like, the Stalker's free paralysis. The Angel of History will be able to navigate the current moment in some way that isn't just, like, doom scrolling and, you know, churning content on a treadmill in hopes of things getting better or just waiting for that next paycheck.